So today we're looking at Psalm 114. And this is one of those psalms that is very wordy, and everything is kind of like a metaphor. And when you read it for the first time, it almost looks kind of like nonsense, or at least it does for me. I've never really been that good with words, definitely more of a numbers man. So it's one of those ones where it takes me a bit of thinking to figure out what it actually all means. So as always, pause the video and have a read of the psalm. Maybe read it through a couple of times if you need to get your head around it. So verse 1 is talking all about when the Israelites, God's people, were led out of slavery in Egypt by God. Before the times of Jesus and salvation through his resurrection, this event was seen as the central act of redemption for God's people, which is why it was and is still celebrated so much by Jewish people. But we now know that it points towards Jesus coming and saving God's people from slavery to sin, not just saving the Israelites from Egypt. So God's people, they were in a foreign land with people who spoke a foreign tongue, a foreign language. And this is what it's like for Christians now in our world, because we're not supposed to be slave to sin. We're not supposed to be slave to the world. We were created to be with God. And this verse points forwards to a time when we will go to live with God and no longer be in a foreign place. We'll be home when we get to heaven. Verse 2 reminds us, though, that God does dwell with us when we're in this world. When it says Judah became God's sanctuary and Israel his dominion, that means that God came to dwell with his people. And it's the same now. He's still here. He's not a God that looks on from above or from afar, but he's a God who lives with us and within us. The next section, so verses 3 to 6, look at how the earth responds to God. So it says, the sea looked and fled, the Jordan turned back. The Jordan, that refers to the River Jordan. So this is saying that the sea fled in fear and that a river reversed its course. And those aren't normal things that happen. Okay, the sea moves a bit with tides, but it tends to be slow and predictable. Rivers flow in a constant direction because water flows wherever gravity pulls it. But something made the river and the sea act unnaturally. It says the mountains leaped like lambs, the hills like rams. Again, it's not normal behaviour for huge lumps of rock and earth. They don't tend to move even slightly, let alone leap and skip. But something caused the earth to act unnaturally. So the next stanza of the psalm is asking, why did this happen? And in the last section, we get the answer. He says, tremble, earth, at the presence of God. Nature fears God. Why? Well, because at the hand of God, the sea can be pushed away, rivers can be reversed, hills and mountains can be moved. God has power over the whole of creation. And this psalm is alluding to when he parted the Red Sea to get his people out of Egypt and get them across the Jordan. It alludes to times where he presented himself on Mount Sinai and the mountain shook before him. And verse 8, the final verse, refers to when God produced water from rocks of the desert to sustain his people. And that verse points forward to when God brings us new life through Jesus and through salvation. Now, unusually, there's no sort of practical conclusion or summary from this particular passage. This is just a song about how amazing God is and how powerful he is, so much so that the elements of the earth fear and worship him. So how much more so should we fear and worship the God. We who are living beings and living creation, we should fear God. We should worship God. So my challenge to you today is, let's do that. Let's worship God. Whatever we're doing today, let's worship God. See you next time.